Hello and welcome to Wordpath, the show about Oklahoma Indian languages and the people who are teaching and preserving them. My guest tonight is a friend, Linda Jordan. Linda, welcome to the show. It's kind of odd to say that because you're here every week already. The first thing maybe we can talk about is your role on the Wordpath show, because you've been directing for us for, I don't know, I think over a year now. It seems like you've been our director forever, and I'm very grateful for your help. Maybe you could tell a little bit about why and how you got involved in that, and what it's been like to learn all that.
Well, initially I came to the show simply out of curiosity. I wasn't exactly sure what you did here. I knew that you were involved in language preservation, and I was very interested in that. So I came to the show. I remember I gave you a call, and I didn't hear from you for quite a while because you are very, very busy. Well, he's a busy person. We have a busy person here. But that actually was kind of good because it emphasized the need, for me to work on the show. And then I came, and I started behind the cameras. It was very, very fun.
Isn't that exciting when you first come and work on the camera on a TV show?
It was
put on that headset.
Yeah, it was very, very good. And so, it's just become more interesting through time. The different jobs are very, very interesting, and plus you are involved in something that is really important, and where there is kind of a desperate need for help. So, yeah.
Well, I'm really glad you've been helping us out. And, maybe some other people will be inspired to come and join us. We always are welcoming new crew members. As long as you live in Norman and you're 18 or older, you can come and take the class and become qualified to be a community producer on your own. Let's bring this back to language a little bit now.
Okay.
I thought maybe we could start by giving a little personal background on yourself. You're from Tulsa, right?
I'm from Tulsa originally.
And some people, although you were on a previous show about Cherokee, some people may not know how you were involved in language preservation, and what is it that you do that's related to our topic?
Well, originally I moved around quite a bit, and I came back to Oklahoma to attend the University of Oklahoma as a graduate student in the master's program, and I did have a primary interest in linguistic anthropology. And I knew a little bit about North American languages, but not very much at all. And then I began taking a Cherokee class at OU from Laura Anderson and Bobby Blossom, and was just immediately fascinated. It was absolutely amazing. And I remember sometime within the first month of taking the class, I went to the library trying to discover more about certain things that interest me, like the sounds of the language, and just how different things worked. And there was almost no material available. And that was shocking to me. It was, really shocking to me.
In Oklahoma, of all places.
In Oklahoma, of all places, yeah. But, you go to the library for virtually any other subject, and you can find, mountains of material, and to find almost nothing on particularly a language like Cherokee, where there are so many speakers.
Well, now, I'm not asking you to say anything nasty, but why do you think that is?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure. I know that...
because there are materials that could be there that aren't, right?
There are some, but there are in general, it seems, a lack, just a general lack of materials on Cherokee anyway. There's many kind of primary materials on Cherokee, like beginning level Cherokees, and then there's a few very, very good dissertations and some excellent, very technical articles on Cherokee, but not nearly as many as there are, say, for Navajo or many of the other languages.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in time maybe that'll be corrected. I hope so.
Yeah.
When did you first get interested in languages? Was it when you came to work on your master's degree?
Well, it's a little bit roundabout. I've always just loved language in general. Like even when I was very young, like even 8 or 9, I used to love to write. Had a lot of fun writing. As a teenager, I actually had a typewriter for a while to just write. So just in a very general sense, I've always loved language and reading, and I've always had a certain degree of ability with it. I could take language classes and learn them relatively easy. And then a few years ago, I was in school and I took my first linguistics course and just absolutely loved it. It was so interesting to me.
What did you like about it?
I don't know. There was a quality
Because
about
I know
it.
some people hear linguistics and they kind of go, oh,
Yeah.
no, it's like, it might as well be astrophysics or
Yeah.
geometry or something to some people, because it can be extremely technical.
Yeah, it can be, but I think it takes a certain kind of thinking. I know this sounds really odd, but maybe you have to have certain kinds of tendencies in order to like it, because I know also when I was younger, I loved algebra of all things, and it reminded me a lot of doing algebra. Yeah, it's very much like doing algebra or something like that. And it reminded me of other things that I'd done in my life that I very much enjoyed. And plus, the fact that I had never really thought of language as being something that was embedded in the mind, or, I'd never thought of it in certain kinds of ways. And that was absolutely fascinating to me. Yeah, very, really, really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think I have a similar take on linguistics. It can be a very highly technical field and sort of formulaic and mathematical almost, and yet in the process of doing that kind of work and learning to look at language in that way, which is interesting and different from what we're used to doing, in order to do the work, you have to expose yourself to different languages a great deal, and you have to do problems in different languages from all over the world, and you get exposed to a lot of language and culture in the process of doing this relatively technical work. To me, it's a nice combination of brain exercise and just cultural travel. I love that about it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, now before we go on to talk more about language, I should maybe mention that you also have a background as an artist. Would you like to just say a little bit about that, and is there some connection there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think so. The connection doesn't quite make a lot of sense to me, but I was an artist for a number of years and a painter for a number of years, and I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but I somehow skidded out of that and into linguistics. But one of the oddest things to me about that has been that working with Cherokee doesn't feel that much different to me than painting. There's some kind of something very similar in the process as well.
I've never heard anybody make that.
It's so it's
interesting.
Yeah,
you said that before.
Yeah.
Can you describe any more?
Well, all I know,
similar about it?
I'm not sure. Well, I think that maybe part of it is part of it may have to do with just in working with Cherokee, you go through a lot of a discovery process, partially because we do need to learn so much more about the language, and you have to approach it in a certain way. There's certain things that we do know that we can say for certain, but you have to leave your mind open and just
be open to different ways of looking at something. It's sort of like observing as an artist.
It's very much about
Boy,
observing.
I never thought about that. It's interesting that you have that take on it. Well, now, how did it come to be Cherokee rather than Comanche or Japanese or some other language?
Well, I do have some Cherokee background, but I wonder sometimes if that was my primary motivation for getting involved with it, though. I don't know why I took the Cherokee class. I mean, I would have to guess that
That's
that
fair. Sometimes we don't know.
I don't know.
Why
I'm really not sure.
Well, let's put it this way then. Now, you've been studying or teaching Cherokee for some years now. Are you happy that it was Cherokee that you chose? How do you feel in retrospect?
I am absolutely delighted. I mean, you cannot, the more you work with this language, I mean, you're going along and you're headed in a certain way, and inevitably something will pop that just is so amazing and so unbelievable. And, those of us who work with the language, there's a few of us who we get together and we talk about it, and we worry a little bit that maybe we might be getting a little bit arrogant because we're just so sure that there's no other languages in the world that could possibly be doing this. It does such amazing things and such surprising things. It's just an absolutely amazing language, absolutely amazing. So I I consider it a very, very fortunate chain of events.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your experience teaching the language. You've always team taught, right, with Bobby Blossom? With Bobby Blossom,
and that has definite learning experience. At this point, I think about that quite a bit, because it is a team-taught class, but increasingly, for example, right now, I'm thinking about it, that the linguist's role in the classroom is more as a mediator, that the speaker should...
So you mean like if there's something the student doesn't understand and the native speaker is having trouble making it clear to them, you can come in and say, "Oh, look at it like this. This is how it's put together," or something.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what.
So you're one of the tools at Bobby's disposal. In other words, in the classroom.
Exactly. But it's difficult You know, there's kind of a real art to putting yourself into that role of being a mediator, you know, because there's so many things that you want to tell the students, and there's so many interesting things that always come up. But it's essential that the speaker, you know, because speakers have certain kinds of intuitions about their own languages that people like me could never have. I mean, it wouldn't matter how long I spoke Cherokee, or I worked with the language. I could never know this language the way that Bobby Blossom or any other speaker could know this language. Yeah. And, you know, it's...
I know we've talked about that a lot, and I totally agree with you on that, because I was involved in teaching Comanche for a long time, and I have lots of things to say about Comanche that native speakers don't have to say, and some of it's useful, but the real knowledge, the real fundamental knowledge is with the native speaker. There's just no trading. I wouldn't want some, I don't know, Slovenian linguist telling people how to speak English while I was sitting there just being a sort of an assistant on the side, you know, because I'm the one that really knows how to speak English, and I'm sure it must feel the same from the point of view of the native speaker in these classes. I think the classes have evolved quite a bit through the years, haven't they? Seems to me when I was involved in, I think the second year that they had these classes, in about 92, and I was teaching Comanche with Lucille McClung at the time. And I know the feeling then, sort of set, the feeling was somewhat, the tone was set somewhat administratively within the university, and some of it was just sort of, I don't know, just assumptions that who knows where they came from. But the feeling in the beginning was sort of like, this is the linguists class, and the native speaker is there as a resource. And now it's getting more and more to be a little bit the other way around, which is, I think, the way it should have been all along.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
I still do believe in this idea of team teaching, unless you happen to have a native speaker who is also a linguist, because I think linguistics really does have something useful to bring to bear. But I agree with you that the primary resource is the native speaker in any language learning.
Oh, absolutely. And now, you know, I've always wished that the university would have, you know, additional classes, that we would have these courses, you know, Cherokee 1, 2, and 3, that were led by the speaker, you know, but the other classes, more advanced classes.
A whole different track, you mean? Or
yeah, well, you know...
in addition to team taught courses? Or
yes, absolutely, like courses for linguistics students, or just people who are interested in a more advanced knowledge of Cherokee, that were like research classes, you know, where essentially the linguist would be in control or whatever, you know, where...
like they always want to be.
Yes. You know, what about this, you know, where we could go in and, you know, maybe have one speaker or several speakers that, you know, we could ask lots of questions of, and brainstorm with one another. And I do think that that would be a good idea, but on a more general level, I definitely believe the courses need to be led by the speakers. You know, that's what the students are interested in, and, you know, the students need just to hear the language and hear those kinds of intuitions about the language.
And no matter how good an analyst someone is of a language, they usually don't have the proper pronunciation, accent, intonation, all the little paralinguistic accoutrements that go with language, gestures. You were telling me Cherokee doesn't use a lot of gestures during speech.
I haven't found that to be a primary thing, but, you know, I hesitate to say that publicly, because sure enough I'll end up being completely wrong about that. But, you know, it might be a good thing to say it publicly. You might get some letters, no, how could you say that? But, you know, the things which...
Well, I think, you know, language communities do differ in the gestures that they use, or how much they use them. I mean, Italians are sort of famous the world over for gesticulating a lot, right? I mean, some of this is sort of has become a caricature, but I think there's a grain of truth. There certainly are some differences. So I never had thought about you know, a language community not using gesture very much, but it seems quite possible.
I haven't seen it as a primary. But you know, there's other sorts of things that go on that, you know, make it essential.
Now, we've been talking about these classes, which most of them have been team taught by a linguist kind of person and a native speaker working together, where the linguist is not a native speaker of the language. That kind of brings up another question. Unless I missed it, I don't think you actually called yourself a linguist, but do you consider yourself a linguist? Or are you just someone who takes the role of the linguist in a class, or what are you exactly?
I consider myself an innocent in the world of linguistics. I'm not sure. I'm not a linguist yet.
Congratulations, I'm sure.
No, I mean, there's so much that I need to learn. I guess that I'm somebody who is taking the role of the linguist in the classroom. But, you know, for example, this past week, you know, there's been several of us up at the university working on research with, you know, and so I've been working with a couple of real linguists, you know, and have learned exactly how far I am away from I don't believe I could call myself a linguist at this point in time. I know some of the things that linguists know, you know, but...
we might as well name names. You've been meeting with Marcia Haig, who has taught here in the Choctaw classes, and with Keith Johnson, I believe his name is, who's he's a UCLA trained linguist, so I feel some link with him. He spent some time with Peter Palateography, which is, he has run perhaps the world's premier phonetics laboratory for many years. He's retired now, but still works there. So as soon as I heard that this man was coming to town and he had worked with or been trained by Peter Ladefoged, I thought, sounds pretty good. Sounds like a real linguist to me.
Absolutely.
And so what exactly have you been doing? Have you been looking at Cherokee in some detail? And has it been phonetically oriented work mostly?
Phonetically oriented work, very, very valuable
What kind of
work.
things does one look at when you study the phonetics of Cherokee?
One of the first things we looked at, which I was very, very pleased about, was that we started looking at the vowel system, which was very, very exciting. We did a number of spectrographs. We brought spectrographic equipment with them.
Maybe we should say a little bit about what spectrographs are.
Essentially, they're like voice prints.
Right.
You know,
a lot of linguists don't like that term voice print because it brings a whole set of assumptions with it about how you can identify people by their voices and things.
Yeah.
But basically what people might think of as voice print is what it is, right? And it comes out of a machine called spectrogram.
Spectrogram
is the actual visual representation. It comes out of a spectrograph, which is a piece of scientific laboratory equipment that analyzes basically the acoustic properties of speech, right? Now, why does one do this? Why not just learn to speak it and leave it at that?
Because, I mean, there's a number of reasons for that. It's the sounds of Cherokee, the sounds between all languages or many languages tend to vary. You know, for example, when we're looking at the vowels of Cherokee, they're somewhat different, than they are in English. And plus, I think, it's uncertain whether or not there's been a change through time in the vowel system or exactly what's been going on. But it seems as if the vowel inventories which exist right now are somewhat inaccurate, and it makes it easier in the preservation of the language and teaching the language if we can, have this kind of information available to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are a number of people who have done studies of Cherokee of one kind or another. A number of people who've talked about what the vowels of Cherokee are, for instance. And I think you were telling me this afternoon, basically, for a long time you've disagreed with all accounts you've read, or felt that they weren't entirely accurate, that you were hearing things different than what had been reported.
Exactly.
So then you can have a phonetician come in and make your spectrograms and just verify, well, is this vowel closer to this vowel or closer to that one? Or has this vowel changed in this word? Or
Exactly.
So it's partly of interest to phoneticians as a matter of pure research. What do languages do? How do they vary? But it also, I think you were saying, it can be useful in teaching the language.
Oh, absolutely. It can be useful in teaching. I mean, one of our students from this summer came up and observed what we were doing for a while. He didn't come up on the day that we were working on vowels, but we were doing something called Palateography, where...
It's disgusting to be a subject.
It's absolutely disgusting, yes it is. But really interesting.
You generally paint your palate, which is the roof of your mouth, all the way back, just about to your uvula, the very back of your throat, with some nasty charcoaly stuff, because that's what shows up well on the photographs that you take later. And then you'll pronounce the word and take another picture of it to see where that gunk has been rubbed off, and it shows where your tongue and so forth are making contact with.
Exactly, yeah. And that has been so, I mean, he was just fascinated by these pictures.
But it gives you very good evidence for exactly what's going on inside of someone's mouth.
Exactly. And we were looking at like fricative like S's and lateral fricatives and things like that, just kind of trying to figure out exactly where things are. And, the student was looking at the pictures, because he's very serious about the language, and he was looking at the pictures in order to start trying to adjust his own tongue position so that he could say certain sounds more accurately. Yeah, and I think that's important.
I think that's
to be
great.
able. Yeah.
I'm glad people are doing that. Well, you just talked about a possible contribution of linguistics to language teaching. You want to talk for a minute about linguistics versus language teaching as a field of expertise. For instance, in the classes at OU or similar classes wherever they might be taught, where people are adults, say, are trying to learn some fluency in a language, what do they need more, a linguist or a language teaching expert or just a native speaker, or how does it all come out?
Oh, we need all of it. We need all of it, absolutely all of it. Well, I think that perhaps for a language like Spanish, we already have quite a bit of information, but, somebody who's simply trained in language teaching,
right? Because they have materials they can kind of lean on more.
Exactly. But when it comes to the North American languages, I think we need all of it, absolutely all of it. I mean, to send somebody in just as a language teacher who isn't a native speaker or doesn't have any kind of knowledge of linguistics, I don't see how it could work. And it isn't even that you have to bring linguistics in the classroom, but in order to collect information so that you can
have the findings of linguistics as a kind of reference.
Exactly.
And of course, if you have just a linguist who's not a native speaker, who's too much in charge, I hate to say it, but very often they or we can tend to get a little self-absorbed and find something fascinating for its own sake that might not be that helpful to the students.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I've done it many times.
Not to mention that they may mispronounce things and so forth. You really obviously need the native speaker above all.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're starting to run a little short. I think they're about to give me the 5-minute. I wanted to spend a minute, though, talking about, since you have this background of directing the show and learning video skills, and the interest in language and the linguistic background, I recently wrote an article for Pathways, which is the newsletter of Intertribal Wordpath Society, which I called Texts, Lives, and Videotape. And that sort of touted videotape as a good language learning tool and language teaching tool. And basically what I said was that there are a lot of things, we need dictionaries and we need grammar books and exercises and things like that, but there are a lot of things that you need to know about a language to be a fluent speaker that are not in a dictionary and are not in a grammar book.
Yes.
And I feel that video is a good way to capture some of these things. If you don't just sit someone down and have them do something sort of stiff and scripted, if you actually videotape actual conversations between speakers, sort of living language, and all the gestures, if there are gestures, and facial expression and tone of voice and pitch and everything that goes with it, I think it's a good extra tool to have. Can you give us any insight into how that might be especially helpful with Cherokee? Kind of things that, if you really want to sound like a native speaker, you need to know them, and yet you won't find them in a dictionary, and you won't find them adequately explained in a grammar. Are there things of that sort?
Oh, absolutely. Well, one of the most difficult things about Cherokee is that you do have to have a secure grounding in morphology in order to be able to understand the language, and you have to get...
So for the uninitiated, say a little bit about what morphology
parts
is.
of a word. Essentially like the structure of a word, the structure of the language, little bits and pieces, you know, like all the parts of the word of
prefixes
running,
and suffixes,
prefixes,
and things like
suffixes, things like that. And for a language like Cherokee, you have to have a good grounding in that.
It has a really rich system, doesn't it?
Very, very rich system.
There can be an awful lot of pieces in any one word, right? All of which have their own little bit of meaning.
Yeah, absolutely, and many, many of them. But one of the most interesting things about Cherokee, and all languages contract in natural speech. However, Cherokee, it appears...
An example from English would be like, instead of saying cannot, we usually say can't or
exactly.
can't.
Exactly.
So you might think, well, the meaning of what we're saying really has two parts, can and not, but people almost never say cannot.
Yeah.
They use this shortened form. Now, you will find that shortened form in a dictionary, but I gather there's that kind of goes on in spades in Cherokee, right? And it's not all to be found in a dictionary.
I'm tempted to say sometimes that this language doesn't just contract, it collapses completely, I mean, and it isn't something, it's very problematic for English speakers, but for Cherokee speakers have absolutely no problem with it whatsoever.
It's easy for them, right? They speak the language.
What's the problem, Absolutely, but students, and trying to elicit that kind of contraction in natural speech from speakers in an unnatural context.
In the classroom,
yes, you can get a little bit of it, but if you can capture Cherokee speakers on tape and give them a little bit of time to begin talking to one another.
Kind of catch them off guard when they're relaxed, talking the way they really do talk to each other. Yes.
Exactly, and it's so important for students of this language to be exposed to that as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how that would be especially useful.
Yeah.
Anything else you can think of? Is there anything, have you ever, since you've been doing video and know how to do it now, have you ever thought, there's a certain project I'd love to do sometime with Cherokee language? Or do you have like a list of these things? I always have lists of them with Comanche, I know.
Yes, well, there's one, and actually I am intending to do it. I had hoped to do it this summer, but I haven't done it at all. I would like to do a series of Cherokee shows that are like, the shows on, I guess it's Channel 43 or whatever, on French and Spanish, where you set up different situations.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
Cherokee speakers at like a diner, for example.
And how would this work? Would this be like sort of an example of living language on tape, right? Would you then have subtitles? Or?
Subtitles, and have them at a level where they could be learning, in the same way that like those French kinds of...
I've seen some of those. I guess the ones you're talking about, that actually they're quite well done.
Exactly.
It takes a lot of care and planning, I'm sure, to put them together, but they really do make the language learning easier.
Exactly.
That's the point of a language learning tool.
Exactly.
Well, I think it'd be great if you did that.
Well, I hope to do it someday. Yeah, definitely.
That would be fantastic.
Mhm.
Well, we've only got 1 minute left, so we have to kind of wrap this up. I really enjoy speaking with you, though. You kind of hinted that you were working on a master's degree. You are still working on that, right?
I am still
Tell us
working on that.
as much as you can about that in 30 seconds.
Okay, I'm looking.
What is your project and what will your degree be in?
Specifically, what I am looking at is the vowel system of Cherokee. Yeah, and I'm looking at sound change. My hypothesis, I guess, is that there have been changes.
Hey, if you want to do linguistics, you gotta have a hypothesis.
I'm not very good at them. But my hypothesis has been that there have been changes in the sound system of Cherokee, and specifically in the vowel system of Cherokee, most probably as a consequence of bilingualism. However, I get a little nervous about this. I just want to go in there and see.
Trying to keep an open mind for now while you
I believe in an open
gather
mind.
data, as they say.
Gather data. Yes.
So what will the degree be in, anthropology or linguistics?
It will be in anthropology, yeah.
Well, good. I wish you very good luck in that. I'm sure you'll do a good job, and I hope you do the series of TV shows that you're talking about. I think it would be great. Thank you very much for being on the show, Linda, and thanks for being our director for so long. I hope you keep doing it for a while, too.
I will.
Really enjoy having you here. Well, that's all for tonight. Join us next time on WordPath.
Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita.